All right, welcome. This is our first U-PRISE meeting for the, what school year is this, 17-18? Oh my goodness, 17-18 school year. So thanks for coming out. Hopefully you saw the refreshments, but if not, feel free to help yourself. And hopefully you got to meet at least one other person here tonight, one other parent or administrator or teacher. We have a great crew. We can just go around and do introductions quickly. If you want to turn your mic on and introduce yourself.
My name is Kendall Warren. I teach at Unionville Elementary in 4th and 5th grade learning support.
My name is James Smith. I'm at Patton Middle School and I teach emotional support.
I am Sabrina Elwood. I am the District 504 coordinator and district school psychologist.
My name is Stephanie Brown. I teach learning support at Unionville High School.
And I'm Marianne Amici. I am the parent mentor from Chester County Intermediate Unit.
And I'm Shannon Brown. I'm the supervisor of special education for the district. And to my left, we have Leah Ryder, the director of special education. To my right, we have Michael Audevard, who's the new principal at Hillendale Elementary School. In the back, we have Dave Lissman, who's our director of communications, and also Austin from Tech. Thank you. And thank you to our NHS volunteer staff who were here, who greeted you, and who are also running childcare for us if anyone needed that. All right, so just to get started, just a little bit, just wanted to go over U-PRISE again. Our goal is to provide families of students with disabilities education, resources, and just enhance partnerships with not only us here in the district, but with the community. We're here to help your students succeed and have improved outcomes in whatever area we're looking at, social, academic, behavioral, whatever it may be, we're here for you. Okay, we are still having an advisory committee, so if you're interested, if you have suggestions for topics for future meetings or speakers, if you have any community resources you want to share, join us, be part of the advisory committee. We're only meeting 4 times this year, and I can show you on the website those dates. The next one is in November. Also, you're welcome to just call or email us at any time. Hi, come on in. Let me pull up the website. So our website is just ucfsd.org and then /u-prize, and you can get right to our site. We have all of our news up here, and you'll actually see, I think a lot of people have already heard, but U-PRISE for our first year last year, we were awarded a District of Distinction by District Administration National Magazine. So we did have a little positive press from Chadds Ford Live, Chester County Press, and then the IU's Kids News. So that was very exciting for us to get our name out there, and we have decided to open U-PRISE up to Chester County. So if you have friends who are in other school districts in Chester County, they're welcome to come. Obviously, everything has a little bit of a Unionville spin on it. We have our own staff here, but most LEAs are following the same guidelines and laws. So the information's applicable, and the IU serves everybody in the county. So when we have IU people out or community groups out, they're servicing everyone. So our meeting schedule's on there, our Twitter's on there if you want to follow us. Earlier these seats were empty and I tweeted them out. Meeting coming up in the next hour. We have lots of new topics coming up. Next month, October 11th, actually one of our students who graduated from Unionville, his father is going to come speak. Dr. Al Friedman is a psychologist in the community, going to talk about how you can talk to your children about their differences. So that'll be a really interesting topic to hear about. And just a reminder, we videotape everything, and it's not live, but we will post it on the website so that you can refer back to it later if you're not able to make a meeting but you're really interested in the topic. Also, everything from last year is still posted. If you go to the speaker series links, it's all still there. So if you wanted to see one again, we're trying not to repeat right now as we're only in our 2nd year. So we have all new topics this year. The advisory committee dates are on here if you're interested in participating. New format this year is that they're just going to be right before the general meeting, so back to back, and then we have dinner here for you. And then the other big piece is our community resources page. We try and keep this up and running all the time with resources that we get from the intermediate unit and from parents like yourself and other local community people who share information with us. We're always trying to post activities, special events, any resources that are shared with us, websites, so that you have access to know what's out there in the community. This is just a picture of our pictures from the end of the year. This was our last event that we had, the Community Resources Fair that we had in May. So please use our website. It's a valuable tool If you can't remember the URL, it's on our pens and Post-its over there. Make sure you take it with you. If you ever have anything you want to share with us that you think would be great for us to post, please email it to us, and we'll be happy to put it up on the website. Okay. I think, is that everything right now? All right, so then we'll go ahead and get into our presentation tonight on understanding special needs processes. Mary Ann's going to speak a little bit first in general about different processes, and then we have our Unionville team who's going to talk about a few different aspects. And then at the end, we can take general questions, and then we'll break. And if there's specific questions, if anybody's lingering, you can chat with us, and we can chat with you. All right, and otherwise, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you.
I'll plug you in. There you go. And it'll be up in just a sec.
Well, there we are. Thank you. It's great for me to be here today. I'm the parent mentor at Chester County Intermediate Unit. I have been the parent mentor at Chester County Intermediate Unit for the past 21 years. I was a special ed teacher. I am certified in special ed and elementary education, but it was my children that got me the job. So my son Louis graduated a long time ago, and he has multiple disabilities. I also had 3 other children. His twin sister was gifted. His youngest brother was gifted. And the one in the middle had emotional support for 2 years and successfully exited. So if parents don't believe that they can exit an IEP, it's true. You can, when everything works together. This is wonderful because I always stress to parents to work together. Parents know their child best. And when you work together with the educators as partners, your children are the winners. They become successful. And after 21 years, I can point out quite a few whose children are now successful. So today I'm going to just go over a few things. We don't have much time, and I know Shannon asked me to talk a little bit about communication and then about some of the special ed processes. So very quickly, I will be going over the communication. I will mention about Child Find and FAPE. I will talk a little bit about screening and evaluation, timelines, and of course the notice of recommended education placement and the prior written notice. Communicating with the school. The most important thing about communicating with the school is go to your teacher first. If you have a concern, she knows your child, she knows what your child's doing, how your child is doing. Use the chain of command that's within the school. There's a superintendent can really get annoyed when a parent comes to them and says, my child's not succeeding in elementary school. Wait a minute, did you talk to your child's teacher? So I'm saying use the chain of command. Usually things can be resolved right on the teacher level. The counselor would be the next one that you could talk to, followed by the principal. And then if you still have problems, you would talk to the supervisor of special education. And if you still have problems, then his or her supervisor. So how would you do this? Start the conversation with what you already know, what you know about your child. Ask, okay, there we go. Ask questions. Discuss options. And I'm talking about when you talk with the teacher. After you've done that, have your concerns and questions been answered? If not, if you don't see improvement or you're still concerned, then you can move up to the next level. The next section I'm going to, are there any questions about communication? And if you have any other concerns, you can always call me at the IU and I can get you more information on communication. But in the interest of time, I'm going to move forward very quickly through the special ed process. What is child find? Can you find the children? Okay. The law says that all districts with all children with disabilities residing in the state, including those who are homeless or who are wards of the state, or children with disabilities that are attending private schools regardless of the severity of their disability, and who are in need of special education and related services, are identified, located, and evaluated. This is a mandate that our schools have, to find the children, to evaluate them, and then determine if they need special education. So how do we determine eligibility? Well, the first thing is, does the child have an intellectual disability? Or there are actually 13 qualifiers with regards to determining the eligibility. And we can go over a few more later on. But the first thing is, does the child have a disability? And if they have a disability, does the child need special education as determined by the evaluation team? And you as parents are part of that team. Very important. In the beginning I mentioned, you know your child. You know your child probably better than anyone else because the child's living with you, you're raising them, and so forth. So you're part of this team. Once it's determined that your child meets both qualifications in order to be eligible for special education, then they have the right to a free and appropriate public education. And that it's an education that meets their specific needs. So a program of education and related services for a child with a disability that's designed to meet their special education needs. And appropriate services are those, are those which allow the child to make meaningful progress in the education setting. And it's provided at no charge to the parents. So what is special education? Specially designed instruction provided at no cost to the parents, which meet the unique needs of the child with a disability. The specially designed instruction means that the content, the methodology, or the delivery of instruction is adapted to meet the child's specialized needs that result from the disability. And the instruction helps the child access the general curriculum. Does your child need special education? Your child may be eligible for special education if he or she has a disability as defined by the PA Code, Chapter 14, also the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, so forth. And requires specially designed instruction. I mentioned before there were 13 disability categories. So if your child fits into, once the evaluation is completed by the school psychologist, if it is determined that they have a disability, then they are, and they need specially designed instruction. I'm going to stress that. They need specially designed instruction because there are children who do not, they have disabilities but do not need specially designed instruction. In other words, instruction that's different from the typical, that's customized to meet their specific needs. So I mentioned that there are children with disabilities who are not eligible for special education, and I'm glad you're here. You're 504 coordinator. There are some children with disabilities who do not need specially designed instruction, but may qualify for accommodations in the general classroom under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. This is a civil rights statute which prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities. Some people described it as evening the playing field. In other words, if a child cannot see what's being presented, how are they going to learn? If a child cannot hear what's being presented, what the teacher is saying, how are they going to learn? So if they have a hearing disability and they may need special seating, that's an accommodation. They may need an FM set that's tied in with the teacher so that they can hear, that's an accommodation. A child who uses a wheelchair, who can learn just like every other child, but needs access to the building. They have to be able to get into the building. They have to be able to, I mean, they can't sit in some of the little seats, so you have to have a special tape. That's an accommodation. This is what they're talking about on Section 504. There's a screening process. The school has a screening process in place that identifies the students who may need special education. This process may or may not lead to an evaluation or, for special education, but it's still important that they look at it. So what they do in the screening is they will review the student's records. They'll review the student's vision and hearing, assessments at reasonable intervals to determine students' performance based on grade-appropriate standards in the academics. They'll observe the student's behavior in the classroom or the area in which the student is displaying difficulty. As a parent, you may request an initial evaluation at any time without going through these screening activities. One of the screening activities that I confirmed that you have here is the instructional support team. I recommend that. I think what can be learned through the instructional support team if a child is having some difficulties is very valuable. It may mean that the child just needs some strategies to overcome a specific difficulty that they're having, and after a certain amount of time, if the strategies work, they just continue on with that. But at the same time, it's giving a lot of information to the evaluation team. If the child isn't making progress and does need to go into the full evaluation, you've got that information there. Yes, it's going to take a little more time, and I know as a parent sometimes you want to get it fixed right away. but it's well worth the effort. So you would have the referral for, how would you refer for the evaluation? A parent can ask for the school to evaluate the child for special ed. And this can easily be done by sending a letter to the principal of your child's school. After you send the letter, they will send you a permission to evaluate. And the evaluation request form should be sent to you within 10 calendar days after the receipt of your request. One of the handouts that I brought with me tonight was on the timelines. There's more information there. I'm just going over some of the basics. And if you have any questions, please contact me, and I'd be more than willing to discuss it further with you. The school may contact you to request permission to have your child evaluated. Sometimes the teachers will pick up on things educationally that maybe the parent was not aware of, or maybe, whatever the reason being. So the school can contact you and request your permission. A parent must consent in writing to the evaluation, or school officials, they can't proceed without your permission. So it could go both ways. And if the school really feels there's a problem, they can even request a due process hearing to determine, have a hearing officer listen to it if the parent is absolutely refusing. This is rare. So it is rare, but sometimes it could happen. Usually a parent, when school is saying something's, amiss, there's some problem here with the way your child is learning. Usually the parent is more than willing to cooperate. But the law has it in there just in case. The evaluation will include information about your child's skills, strengths, needs. It'll include testing, assessments that were conducted. Very important to me is the information from the parents. I highly recommend that parents write down everything that they know, all the information. If the parents had an outside evaluation or has a report from a doctor, share it with the school, because the more information that the school has, the better the team and the parents part of the team can put together a program that's going to meet the child's needs. So it'll include the information from parents, classroom observations, observations from teachers, related service personnel. If it's needed, an OT, an occupation therapist, or a physical therapist, or a speech and language, whatever the team feels that they need in order to really get a good picture of what this child's needs are. Under Pennsylvania and federal law, a child with a disability has the right to special education and related services that are provided under public supervision and direction, without charge, and this is to preschool, elementary, or secondary school students, in the least restrictive environment. This means that children with disabilities are educated to the maximum extent appropriate with children who do not have disabilities in the general education class. Studies have shown over the past 40-some years that children who are included with their peers, that their typical peers, progress better. They, after all, they're learning how to live and in a society, in an inclusive society. And of course, it's in conformity with the individual education program. This means if they need special education, they must receive a free and appropriate public education. Timelines. Again, I'm just going over the basics. There's more information in the brochure that I gave you. The entire evaluation process must be completed within 60 calendar days. This is not including the summer. The IEP meeting must be convened within 30 calendar days after completion of the evaluation report or reevaluation report. A lot of times we have the evaluation meeting followed by the IEP meeting, and the parents can waive the timeline for that. An initial IEP for a student will be implemented as soon as possible after receiving parental consent, or no later than 10 school days. The one difference is if a parent does not consent to the initial IEP, the school district cannot proceed. That's, you know, the parent needs to consent to it. Any parents that have any questions, feel free to call me. For any IEP completed after the initial IEP, the IEP must be implemented no later than 10 school days. I'm not going into the details of the IEP, but you as parents are part of the team. And the IEP team will review all the evaluation material and determine how your child is currently performing in school. And they will write the measurable annual goals that are designed to meet your child's needs. And again, I can't stress it enough, you as parent are part of the team. I also recommend that the parent ask any questions, if, you know, what they can do to help, to provide the consistency at home. Again, that's more information, and I can discuss that individual with you, or I could be invited back. That's fine. The notice of recommended education placement, or the prior written notice. This notice summarizes what the school's recommendations are, including the programs and the services recommended for your child. You must indicate your approval of the IEP and educational placement in writing for your child's initial special education placement, the first one, before the school may implement it. On this form, very important, is also the information of, if you don't approve, what do you want to do? You can check there, I approve. You can check there, I would like an informal meeting to discuss it. Or you can check, I don't approve. And you can write exactly why you don't approve. Again, this is all part of the procedural safeguards, because they're going to hand you one of those. And that's another whole information, another whole training that, you know, I can go over with you either individually, or we can come back and just talk about what your rights are and what are your options for your rights. There's no requirement for this notice after each subsequent IEP meeting unless things have changed. So if, let's say, you've had the IEP meeting, you've been presented with the NORA, and you forget to sign it and send it back. Well, unless it's the first one, the school can proceed after 10 days with implementing that IEP. I still recommend that you sign it, have it on record, get it back to the school. This is what I have for tonight. If there's any questions, I will take any questions. If you would like to discuss your own personal situation or your needs for your child, feel free to call me and we can set something up. But right now, I'm going to just have any general questions. Good. I was clear. Great. Thank you. You're welcome.
All right, I will plug in and let you guys take over. I have your presentation. Do you mind if I unplug?
Mm-hmm. Go right ahead. There we go.
Here comes our Unionville spin on things. Are you ready?
Oh, this is important. Each school district does things a little different, but they're all within the law. So,
If you're starting to get tired, there's cookies, there's soda, there's fruit. I know it's late. Yeah. All right, go ahead, team. I don't know who's up first.
I'm going first here. So I'm Stephanie Brown. I'm learning support at Unionville High School. I'm going to talk to you today about how to access Power School Special Education, PSS8 as we call it. This is a really great resource for you as parents because it allows you access to your child's documents online at any time. Two quick things about accessing your documents. It has to be on a computer. It can't be on a handheld device. If you have the app, the Power School app, you won't be able to access any documents through that. And the second thing is you have to have a parent portal account in order to access it. You can't go through your child's account. So if you don't have a parent portal account, you can still get one. I have directions over there. I printed out directions on exactly how to create an account. And if you still can't get in after following the directions, you can certainly call your child's school's main office and talk to the manager there, the office manager, and they can usually help you out with that. So once you get into the Power School parent portal account, it's pretty easy to find the documents. You simply select the child that you want to view. And in the upper right-hand corner, you're going to see a blue box with an arrow, and you just click on that. You'll see a drop-down menu that says Special Education Home, and from there, if you click on that, that'll take you to the child's documents. There'll be a list of the documents created in Power School for the past year. All of the documents that are active are in bold, so you're going to click on any one of those that you want to view. You're just going to click on the magnifying glass to the left, and your document will come up. From there, you can download and save as an electronic file. You can print, or you can simply just view it through the screen. So it's pretty easy.
So I'm going to talk about how to access the progress report, but I'm actually going to log in so you get to see what it looks like as a parent view into Power School Special Education, and then walk you through that process. So you would, once you set up your account, you would put in your username and your password, and then you would sign in. Maybe. What? Okay. So then once you're in, you will see your student. Oh, maybe. Hopefully you can stay logged in. Yeah. this one. Okay. All right, so let's try that again. Okay, so once you are logged in, you'll see your student. This is the arrow we were talking about. You're going to click that, and you're going to go to Special Education Home. And then over here, you want to, two things that are important on this page is setting up your communication. So if you go to Communication and Messages, and then you slide over, this keeps wanting to get big on me. To Settings. Then you want to set up that you get messages and email notifications, so whenever your child's case manager updates documents, you will get a message. It will be a generic message that just says you have documents ready and waiting, but it's a signal to you to log into PowerSchool Special Education and take a look at those. You can set it up with whatever email address you want that you check regularly, and that will allow you to see all that. So then once you've done that, you would go back to your home page, and you would click Access Self-Service Documents. And this will bring up the documents that Stephanie was sharing, the Notice of Recommended Educational Placement, any of the permissions that have been sent to you. And then you'll also see, as the years go on, they do archive the information. So the information from last year's school year is also still here, and you can click on any of those documents. So once you're in, it's pretty easy to navigate. There's a drop-down menu up here. It will let you pick what part of the IEP you want to read. The progress report is included in those parts, so you would click here, and this is where this is a demo account, so it doesn't have a goal in here, but where the case manager would be inputting data every trimester at the elementary school level and every quarter at the middle and high school level toward how your child's progressing towards their IEP goals. You can also, the print screen is always here. You can choose to print just this page or the entire document at any point. And then if your child has more than one goal, you would navigate up here with the numbers and go to every goal that's there. So that should be pretty simple once you get logged in.
Let's see. Aside from your annual IEP meeting that is required each year to kind of bring the whole IEP team together, when can you call a meeting, I guess is the big question. You know, any member of the team can call an IEP meeting throughout the course of the school year aside from the annual meeting date. It could be for a variety of reasons. It could be, they're struggling in math class, maybe some struggles with peers, anything, if a teacher feels like we need to call the meeting together, the case manager, that's always an option. A parent can call the meeting together and bring everybody on the IEP team together. So it's really a back and forth relationship as far as finding out, because meeting is always good. I mean, we can meet and change a document a lot. We can meet and only change the document a little bit. We could keep the document exactly the way it is. So it all depends on kind of what the needs are that present themselves. The first thing you would do is you would contact the case manager. As it was said earlier, contacting the case manager is kind of the first as far as the priority list. Hopefully it's not the superintendent first, and it's usually the case manager. And then I always, as the case manager for the students on my caseload, I always encourage them to contact the teachers along with me. So I'm kind of kept in the loop with everything, because at least at the middle school level, I know it's different at the elementary, but the middle and high school level, it's, they have 6, 7 different teachers. So if they're having problems with math, I always speak to I always let the parent know. Email the math teacher and then CC me on it as the case manager, so I can be in the loop, because the math teachers end up coming to me and saying, hey, I got a parent email from Mrs. Smith, and he's struggling a little bit in math, like maybe we could kind of collaborate and kind of get a game plan going. So to keep the case manager in the loop is always really important. And there'll be a scheduling person that'll contact you to kind of set up the time when you guys can meet. I know at the middle school, just speaking from the middle school, we have specific times that we try to go by to make sure the regular ed teachers are available, because they're a big part of the team. They're important because as the case manager, I'm not in a lot of those classes, and I get a lot of feedback from the regular ed teachers and the related services. So that's really important to try to get as many people in those meetings as possible, just so to have that good dialogue and to kind of help the student as best we can. And getting that information is really invaluable. So they're the kind of big areas. Yes.
So is it, because I'm more familiar with the middle school, but high school, I imagine, so you do the same thing? Do you have a specific chunk of time? Do you want to include regular ed teachers, or is that even more of a?
So it can be challenging, but we always want one of the child's regular ed teachers there. So typically what we do is try to get, arrange the meeting around when one of their teachers is open and doesn't have a class. So hopefully we can move those meetings around so it's not the same. If you have multiple meetings, it's not the same teacher coming every time. But that's typically how we do it. So it's not a specific time every time. We can do it throughout the day.
And I also just, I always ask the parent, maybe would you like to see the math teacher? And I can try to arrange the math teacher. Sometimes math, not to pick on math, but math sometimes could be a struggle for some students, or English, maybe some students struggle with the writing process. So all those things. So we try to work collaboratively with the parents to make sure, if that class is a little bit of a challenge, we get that feedback and then see how we bring the math teacher and kind of see what he or she is seeing, or the English teacher. So it's always important to kind of, if the parent has an idea of who they'd like to at the meeting, because obviously you can't have everybody at the meeting, but if there's a certain teacher that's a concern, or you just want to kind of really touch base with them face to face, that's always helpful too. And the second one is, as in any good relationship, communication is really important. I know we talked about it earlier, but communication. I mean, just from my standpoint and my experience over the years, as I said, CC and me with the communication with the regular ed teacher is really important, but also just any small bit of information that you think maybe just a small, I don't think it's that big of a deal, especially at the middle school level with so much transition going on. From 5th to 6th grade, I found it's such a big transition. So it's important, that maybe they're stressed out, or they're having struggles with peers, or the bus as it rides along, they get home, they're exhausted. All those bits of information, letting the case manager know is really important. I mean, it's really important. Just communicate out as much as you can, as much as you're willing to share. Obviously, we don't want to make it uncomfortable, but I think building that relationship with the parents and the whole IEP team, making it all for the good of the student, I think is really important. I think we need to make sure that we're all on the same page, and that document is fluid. I mean, it's always changing. At least in my position, we're always making changes to it. We're always tweaking it, and I need your help as parents out there, and I need help from the regular ed teacher. I need help from administration to see if this is going to run. It may not be perfect, and we might have to keep revisiting different topics, but we're always trying something new to see if it's going to work. So I think it's really important to have that communication. No small bit of information is too small, so don't hold back. Or if you have concerns, that's my job, is to field those concerns and try to game plan and try to find a solution, or at least try to have a plan in place that we can try to support your child in school, especially at the middle school. I know they got two big transitions coming into 6th grade from 5th grade, and then getting to that high school. I know the high school is it's a big step, and I know at least from middle school, parents struggle with giving that independence, but also, they're still nurturing them in the younger grades, and it's a big transition, I found out. So I think any little bit of communication is really helpful, and it helps me, to help that child throughout the day, because at least when they get to middle school, it's a fast-paced, very moving day, and the kids are very active and busy, and any kind of information we can get is helpful. So I think that's all I have. And now timelines.
Okay, so just a couple quick important timelines to share. Annual IEPs, obviously your child must have an annual IEP meeting once a year. Certainly we have multiple meetings throughout, but you must have one annual every year. And progress reports, elementary school and middle and high school are a little different. Your child will be issued a progress report for your child at the elementary at the end of each trimester, and at the middle and high school it's at the end of each quarter, roughly around the time of report cards. And then re-evals. This is kind of a big thing for the high school, because if your child is going to need to use accommodations in college, we usually like to give them a reeval. I mean, they have to be evaluated every 3 years. They don't have to go through the full reevaluation process, but typically we do, because we want to see where they are, and that document goes with them to college if they provide it, if the child decides to provide it. So if needed, if the team decides that we do need to do a full reevaluation, we issue a PWN once it's received. We have, again, 90 days to complete. The RR is provided to the parents at least 10 days prior and to the IEP meeting, and then we have to have an IEP meeting after the RR is complete within 30 days. 60 days, I'm sorry.
60
I
days.
wrote the wrong number down. Sorry, 60 days,
60
not 90.
days.
My fault, sorry.
So for those of you who didn't catch it, my name is Sabrina Elwood. I am a district school psychologist as well as the district 504 coordinator. I'm not in a specific building. I travel all over, but I'm based here. What I wanted to go over was when a student is dismissed from an IEP, a reevaluation will be completed. So sometimes that's where the 504 is brought in. There's other ways a 504 can be brought into play, but this is one way. So they have an IEP. What we talked about earlier is some students are exited, which is great. They've reached all their goals. And then at the end of the evaluation, the psychologist that's doing the evaluation will then look at do they need any support going forward? And sometimes they do, and a 504 is an option for some of those students. So a 504 is 3 prongs. So in order to have a 504 plan, you have to meet 3 criteria. The first one is does the student have a physical or mental impairment? The second one is the impairment has to be substantial in such a way that it limits one or more major life activities. So substantial is in quotations there, and that's because there is no legal definition of substantial. So that word, that quantity is certainly up to conversation, and you as parents are part of that conversation. What that means for that student, we would review the paperwork in terms of the evaluation, the IEP, where the students are now with their academic levels. A major life activity is anything. Everything is a major life activity. The list is very large. It goes from the basics of breathing to walking, bending, lifting, eating, concentrating, learning, they're digesting. So there are, it's like I said, it's any, and they actually have an other box in case they didn't give you enough choices. That's the second piece. Does it impact a major life activity? The third piece is, with those 2 in play, does the student need accommodations? And accommodations can range, and many of them will look like the student's specially designed instruction in their IEP. Most of the time you won't see all of them in the 504. Some of them may transfer if they're appropriate for that student. But they do look a lot like specially designed instruction. There are no changes to the curriculum. They are more environmental classroom accommodations, accommodations within the school setting. So an IEP versus a 504 plan, they are different. The Section 504 does not cover students that are eligible for special education. It covers students that are in the regular education setting, such as students that are exited from their IEP, and all the accommodations are provided by regular ed teachers and staff. The 504 is governed, they're governed by 2 different bodies. So the 504 is governed by the Office of Civil Rights, and that body ensures that people with disabilities have equal access to pretty much anything, but in our case, access to their education. Whereas the IEP is governed under IDEA, which in terms of IDEA, a student has to meet one of the criteria of the 13 disabilities. And then you would have access to a free and appropriate public education. Another difference is the impairment does not, the impairment in a 504, the physical or mental, it doesn't have to fit under those 13 criteria, those 13 I can't think of it, specific disability categories. So whereas a student could have visual processing types of difficulties, that does not always fit under a specific category under IDEA. But that is a physical impairment that may impact a student in the classroom. That would be something that we can provide accommodations for if they fit all those three prongs. There are various other reasons a student would have a 504 that does not necessarily fit under those 13 categories. The 504 does not have measurable goals. So an IEP has measurable goals. There's progress monitoring. There is a skill attached to that particular goal where the student needs to learn that skill in order to reach that goal. A 504 is meant for students that already met that goal, that already have the skill, they acquired the skill. They just need some accommodations to access that skill in the classroom. So it could be a second set of textbooks at home. So if a student has attention difficulties and they forget a lot of things and too much is going on, they can have a second set of books at home so they don't have to carry it back and forth. We can have environmental changes such as seating changes or away from the windows or doors, distance between desks. There's lots of things that we can do for students that already have the skills. We just need to help them access those skills. 504, the 504 has me, which is the 504 coordinator, and like I said, I'm for the entire district, whereas an IEP has a case manager. And again, communication, just as it is for the IEP, is huge. But what I would say, like we have all set up here, you can contact me, certainly. I'm not in the classroom. So what I would say is contact the teacher, talk to them about, hey, listen, Joe has this accommodation of a second set of textbooks at home. I haven't received that yet. What's going on? Can we get that set up? If it's not resolved at that point, certainly feel free to contact me. That's why I'm there. I coordinate, I set up meetings. I do check in with the teachers to see if there's any difficulties with the accommodations. Check in with the students to make sure that they're receiving their accommodations. But there is not an actual case manager, in the building that is going to be assisting that student. So that's what a really big difference between IEPs and 504s. In terms of differences, there's many, but there's also a lot of similarities. And the major one is both documents are there to ensure the child has access to everything in their educational setting. We meet annually, just like an IEP would. I set that up. I schedule the meetings where a general ed teacher is involved, the counselor, sometimes the principals if they don't have 10,000 other things going on. And then any related services. If the student has a consult with the vision teacher, sometimes the vision teacher will be able to come. So that brings me to a good point. There are no related direct services in a 504 plan. So if a student was receiving OT, let's just say for instance, in their IEP, and there was goals and they were receiving direct instruction from their occupational therapist, that is not something that would transition over to a 504 plan. There may be something where if that student reached their goals in occupational therapy, there may be something where we have a consult, so the occupational therapist would consult with the teachers at the beginning of the year to make sure that they have everything that they need in the 504. Or they may go in once at the beginning of the year and then again in the middle of the year just to check in with the teachers, see how the student's doing. Excuse me. But any of those individuals involved, we would have them in that setting as well. If social work was involved, we would have them at the 504 plan. So again, it is very much like an IP in that situation where all the team members, including you, are involved in that process. Like an IEP, there is a 504 evaluation. Now, for kids that are exited from IEPs, that they will get a reevaluation already built into the actual process. Let's just say, for instance, a student is coming into the district, they go through the IST process, and it's deemed appropriate to look into an evaluation. I can do a 504 evaluation. It could be very comprehensive, such as cognitive, academic, social emotional, or it could be as simple as just behavior scales, teacher feedback, student feedback, parent feedback. And then every 3 years, we meet annually, but every 3 years we do a reevaluation, just to check everything out, see if anything has changed. A lot of times if they're medical types of issues, let's say for diabetics or students with asthma, the reevaluation is very straightforward. You have your diabetic plan, you have your asthmatic plan, nothing necessarily is changing. But sometimes when we're doing a reevaluation for students with ADHD or other types of difficulties such as that, things may change depending upon the reevaluation. That's a 504 in a nutshell. Are there any questions about a 504? Yes.
Is that reevaluation every 3 years mandated by law, or is that something the district just chooses to do?
So, yeah, well, we choose to actually do the 504 evaluation. What it does require is a reevaluation to look at the data regularly, as in 3 years. So we choose to follow the IEP process, the special ed process, which makes it easier and something that parents can understand, that we follow the same process. That answer your question?
That's it.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions about anything that we talked about tonight? Go ahead.
Yes, I would like to know if it's possible not to accept the removal of an IEP.
Not to accept the what?
The removal of an IEP.
So her question is it possible to not accept the removal of an IEP?
And I would say it's not on fantasy grounds, but assuming 1 year you have a teacher who's doing an excellent job and suddenly it seems to the headmaster of the school that the child doesn't need the IEP anymore, but you've been through 4 previous years where you knew obviously there was a problem every single year. Do we have a way to say, we think it's because the teacher is amazing this year, but next year we're back to square one with a new teacher and we want to keep the IEP in place?
Does anyone want to talk or you want?
As the parent, you would always have the right to decline what we're offering or what we're suggesting, but then we would always go back and look at the data and reconvene another team meeting to come to some sort of consensus. So you can always express that you would like it to stay in place, but then we would go back and look at all of the information we have as well. Because it's based on your student need and their current progress towards their goals. So if you can always be exited and re-enter special education if that's needed again in the future too.
Yeah,
I heard it was very difficult to re-enter, even if, you had to go again through a whole process of evaluation, and, as a parent, that's not something that...
if you really feel very strongly that it would not be in your child's best interest to exit the IEP, you have your rights. You can say, I don't agree, and you can request mediation. But again, I have seen both ways. I have seen where the parent says, okay, let's see if he can do with the 504, because it's less restrictive. Let's see if he can be more independent and go on his own. And after a year, it doesn't seem to be working out. I've seen them going back and having the evaluation and seeing where they are and actually reinstating an IEP. But I've also seen where they've been very successful with the 504. When a student gets to college, for example, there are no IEPs in college. In any of the adult post-secondary training. But if they've learned how to use those accommodations, the ones that they've had in a 504, they can say to the college, and they have to do it. The parents, they don't listen to the parents once the child's in college. The student has to do it. They can say, these were the accommodations that I was using in school that were successful. I would like to continue this in my college program. And more often than not, they get them because they are covered. 504 is a civil rights piece, and it also ties in with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So I would say a 504 is less, gives the student more, they're learning on their own. They're learning as a typical student and just receiving the accommodation so that their needs are being met. But then if they're doing it on their own, isn't that better than going back and, reinstating the goals? Although sometimes it happens. Sometimes you need those goals. Sometimes those goals change, and that's where a reevaluation comes in very handy to see how they would change and what changes would be needed.
I just want to clarify too, not every time a student is dismissed from an IEP do they qualify for a 504. I don't know if you know any statistics on that, Sabrina. I don't off the top of my head, but but so it does happen, but not every single student. But at any time, if you don't agree with something that's in the IEP, we request that you check informal meeting, and that's the first step. And just bring the team, the school team, back together, and let's talk again and see if we can work something out. And then, obviously, on the NORP, you also have options after that for mediation, which means someone comes down from the Office of Special Education and helps us, sort of impartial person to help offer some perspective. And then after that, always is the option for due process.
And I
if you
will
have-
say, I'm sorry.
That's all right. I was just going to say, if you have any questions or you want to discuss it, that's my role at Chester County Intermediate Unit, is to help you parents, because you're your child's best advocate. I am not an advocate. I'm only a mentor.
Mr. Brogan, did you have a question?
You had mentioned that an IEP becomes invalid as it goes to college. Is it based on age attainment, or after college going and transition, after high school and transitioning to college?
An IEP is not invalid. It is specially designed instructions. Colleges, they have criteria. The student has to get into the college, but they're not required to do specially designed instruction. They're not going to change their modify their curriculum for the student. The student's going to have to be able to handle the curriculum. But if the student needs accommodations for either a specific learning disability or for attentional problems, yes, they can get the accommodations, and the student should know how to handle it. My second son is a teacher in a technical school, an adult technical school. And he says he has students in his class that are learning auto mechanics, and they have accommodations. And those students who know how to use their accommodations are usually successful.
And that's a big piece of post-secondary transition. So when your child's 14 or older, that's a big focus of the IEP team meeting. So if you're in elementary, you haven't maybe had that conversation yet, but at the middle school and high school, you should be having that conversation. Your child has post-secondary transition goals that focus on education, training, and independent living. And a big piece of that is self-advocacy. And so the high school and even the middle school work a great deal on that with you as a family and your child to make sure that they're prepared, because when they go to college, that IEP doesn't really do them much good anymore except for the accommodations piece, which they need to be able to self-advocate for what works for them.
Exactly. They have to ask for it. They have to self-disclose. Some students don't want to and try to do it on their own. And if they're successful, that's great. And if not, well, then they usually will come back and say, listen, this is what I used when I was in school. I needed these accommodations, and more often than not, they will get them.
Any other questions?
So yeah, so every year I have a roster that, and then it's also a master roster and then a roster specific by school. I get that out to the counselors, and then they are able to share that with their teachers. There's also in Power School an indicator next to the student's name, and it'll say IEP or 504. So if they don't get the roster and their teachers are looking at it before they get the roster, any student that has a 504, you're able to see it, click on it, and it brings it down.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So they're able to see basically when you pull it up from your side, they're able to see basically the same thing. Students, like at John's 504 plan, and they bring it down. Same thing with IEP.
Good questions. All right, well, I guess we'll wrap it up for tonight. If you have any other questions, please feel free to come up and chat. There's lots of extra snacks. Please take them with you. We hope to see you on October 11th. That's our next big general meeting where we talk about talking to your children about their differences. And thanks again, speakers and parents, for coming out. Have a great night.
Thank you.